Hey, what?
Hey, Fayad.
Claim the host quickly. So, hey, Bjorn.
Hey,
Nice.
Hi, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
We missed you 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I couldn't attend.
We got some exciting things coming up in the pipeline.
Oh,
let's see. Let me see if this works. I need to have a two-screen setup.
You and me both.
No. I mean, I have it. It's just
Oh.
Zoom ignores it, which is I don't understand why.
so Kaya, do you have the time for the meeting on
On the
the
5th.
5th?
So it will
Yeah.
be the exact same time as this one.
Okay.
3 p.m. UTC, yeah.
Okay.
Let me just send you the link actually for that meetup. Oh, I see they added to that meeting beyond next week.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, Loan.
Hey everyone, how are you?
Hey.
We're good. I was just telling Fayad in the meeting before this that I couldn't find my All Blacks hat.
I was telling Bob it's pointless to have an All Blacks app.
Exactly.
It's just like a memory of the loss.
A bad memory, like a bad dream.
At least it makes you guys feel good. So
Yeah, we appreciate that part.
Hello guys.
Yeah, Anton.
hey, Anton.
Hey.
Here's the one.
Hello.
I've only 30 minutes today, so we'll have to drop in a half an hour.
No worries. No worries. And enjoy Lisbon. Let's give everybody, what, 2 more minutes? And then we can get started.
Sure. That's good.
Yellow.
Hey, Anushka. Hey, Fabio. Hello. Hey, Gonzalo. All right. Well, I think we have enough people again to have like some proper conversations about release branches. So welcome everyone. Before we start, obviously I want to point out the antitrust notice that we need to take into account, as well as the Hyperledger Code of Conduct. The presentation will be shared after, also in the Discord. So if you need to check the link, you can find a clickable link there. Today we have a few items. We have a quick community update from Fayad, roadmap update. Wanted to have an open conversation about release management, which is a hot topic these days, given that all sorts of things are happening that sort of point that we're at the limit of what we can do with our current approach. We have one issue after with regards to architectural decision records, which is a proposal from David Polterak, who couldn't join today, unfortunately, but I'll present it on his behalf, and then we can close with some Q&A. So before we start, anybody who hasn't been in this call that wants to sort of introduce themselves, mostly to Björn. I don't think we have. So hopefully, as of next week, once we do the announcement, there will be more people. I think there's already a good number of people that have sort of indicated that they wanted to join the call. But I'll leave that to Fayad with his community.
Cool. I won't take much time. So yeah, as you guys might have heard, we had a little bit of a delay in terms of our formal announcement. We're still aiming for this week. So with that said, we are going to go ahead with the meetup on the 5th of December, 3 p.m. UTC, exact same time as this call, and that's next week, Tuesday. If you guys haven't signed up for the event, I am dropping a link in the chat. I'll include it in the meeting notes as well, which will go onto our wiki page, or sorry, conference page. You can grab it there. In addition to that, if you guys are not part of the Discord server, now's your time to get part of to be part of the Discord server. I'm dropping another link in the chat for that as well, and I'll continue to do this till everyone on this call is part of our Discord server. And then yeah, next week I'll just give a high-level agenda of what's going to happen next week at the meetup. So we're going to be going over what the lab is about. Bart is doing that little presentation, and then a quick demo of the agent. Curtis and Javi is going to be doing that. And then we got a quick demo and a slide presentation of what's already been built. Thanks to Bjorn and John, who's not on the call at the moment. They'll be going over that. And then Bart's going to give us an update of the roadmap. And then last but not least, and I think this is super important, is how everyone can get involved. So yeah, I'll leave it at there and hand back over to you, Bart.
Okay, so and just for my information, so the announcement this week, that means a coordinated messaging from Hyperledger and ourselves, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm not on Twitter, but I'll be on the lookout then for blog posts. Stuff like that.
It's going to be on LinkedIn as well, so I have no excuses.
Are we on Instagram? All right. Cool. So a little bit of a roadmap update. I'm working on a transitioning, I would say at the issue level, thanks to the Open Enterprise Agent repository. We have a project there, and I'm working on making sure we get the issues there, making sure we have consistent labeling practices and things like that. And the aim is, and this was also part of the conversation last time, to sort of have a rolling roadmap in the structure of now, next, later format. So it's going to be much more, I would say, easy to set expectations without mentioning specific dates. Though obviously internally at IOG we have a little bit of process which sort of commit ourselves to date. I think when we work in the community, it's easier to to share it at a slightly higher level. Having said that, we have a 2.7 release, which is imminent. So somewhere this week, we'll be adding Keycloak for IAM to the agent, and including sort of JWT token, so you can then have external services be responsible for your user and account management. We have like secure management of that. And we'll also add self-service tenant onboarding. So for a multi-tenancy solution, that will be fully supported then. Fabio and Shailesh have done hard work on the mediator. So discovery features are now supported, and the WebSocket support is in alpha. Live mode is coming. Right, Fabio?
Yes, we are testing that.
Okay. We have just audited and released our cryptographic core library, also known as Apollo. But basically, the idea is to put like all critical cryptography in a separate library, making it much easier to maintain and have a look at, and making sure that whichever component you work on in the agent, you can trust that you're using secure cryptography, making it harder to make mistakes on that level. So that will be coming in 2.7, a little bit further down the road. So either end of this year or in Q1, first half of Q1, typically. Finalizing an on-creds, so we already have sort of the issuance part of it, but we need to work on the presentation part and the revocation part as well. There is a new DID-peer specification, which is, I think it confused me. It's the second DID-peer spec, but it's called DID-peer 4 because spec 2 and 3 were not published, I think. But anyway, we're gonna sort of introduce that. We expect it to not be a lot of work, but it is going to introduce a breaking change. So we're sort of awaiting when the rest of the community will embrace that, to sort of time that in the right way, because it doesn't really make sense to sort of be the first one and then have to wait 3 months before everybody else has it, so we're not interoperable during that time. We are working on a sandbox environment linked to testnet. So what we want to do is make it easy for people to scale up from testing locally with an in-memory ledger to pointing it towards a multi-tenant agent, issuers and verifiers linked to testnet, to sort of get a better feel for how their system will perform. The mediators and the SDKs are going to be added to Hyperledger Lab, so this is going to happen early next year. Probably the way we're thinking about it now, probably mediator first and then SDK second. So January, February, or February, March, something along those timelines. We're just sort of making sure we clean up the repos. But ultimately, I think having everything under Hyperledger Lab will make it much easier to manage, also from a community perspective, because there's a lot of components in the platform that we want to be talking about together, because they represent sort of an easier story to tell. And then lastly, and I think Björn, this came to your point, like what's going to happen with Prism Node. So we're already shipping Prism Node in our releases, but we are working on a pluggable VDR architecture, and we're going to introduce it in phases. So we're going to start with a phase 1. Probably this is going to be early next year, with a proxy service, which allows to not just have Prism Node, but have also connected to other VDRs like IPFS, or maybe just a database, whatever sort of the use case requires. In that conversation, in the second phase, we are considering basically a full rewrite of Prism Node to make it much more lightweight, because it's very heavy. for what we're using it for. So that's something that's currently under exploration. So it might be phased out altogether, but it is available today, and it should be going forward. If we don't phase it out, it's going to remain publicly available. So I hope that that sort of answered your question with regards to Prism Node.
Yep. Just a few questions regarding to this. So first of all, you mentioned you were releasing the Prism node with your release. So I always saw Esteban linking the Prism node, but as far as I know, this was never accessible from the outside. So I have no access to it. Maybe it's still in an IOG repository and you can't get it out of there.
I think it should be publicly available though.
No, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's something we need to look at.
Let me jump in. So the thing is that the Docker container is available publicly. The thing is that you need to authenticate in the GitHub registry in general. So this is like a mandatory thing. So what you need to do is just to take your personal access token with read packages permission, just log in into GitHub registry, and then it's available for you. So you don't need to be a part of IO or have any kind of special token for that. So yeah, but you have to authenticate in GitHub registry anyway.
Okay, and then basically I would run the node next to dbSync.
No, it will be only Node. So for the whole stack, you need to, if you would like to connect a Prism node to the Cardano stack, you need to run Cardano stack separately for sure.
Okay, but the Prism node would then connect to Postgres or...
Yeah, so how, good questions from your side. So I guess this requires probably a little bit more inputs and documentation for you, but it will be just a Docker container for Prism node. So you will have to configure probably a Docker Compose script to run it together with Postgres instance and specify special variables that will point to the Cardano node, right?
Okay.
And how you run Cardano node, it's up to you, right? So mainnet, preview, preprod, and yeah, dbSync for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a very good point. So I believe we need to prepare one list markdown to document this process because I don't think we have it publicly. So it makes sense to do as soon as we can.
Yeah, that would be awesome. The second question regarding anon creds. So you're currently writing like the schema definitions also through the node, or is this a separate process?
So this is a separate process. So we're doing it at the agent level.
Okay.
Yuri, correct me if I'm wrong, or Ben.
Yeah,
if I'm wrong.
we have a default storage for credential definitions and the credential schema in the Postgres as well.
Yeah.
But later we might consider some VDR abstraction to store it in a blockchain if it's really required.
Okay, so it's only just in memory and only available to the specific node.
To the specific agent. That
Yes,
is,
sorry, for the agent.
Yeah. And you can expose the schema through a HTTP URL.
Yeah. Okay, and the last question regarding the VDR proxy service, is it more like an SDK where you can build your own solution, or are you leveraging like services like GoDaddy to write to different chains?
Not fully decided yet. It's more likely the first one because it also allows you to do the second one. But we want to make it possible for everybody to say, well, hey, especially in like the blockchain space, people tend to be quite opinionated about sort of, no, but it must be on my blockchain. And we want to give the answer saying, well, that's fine, but then you do the heavy lifting of creating the right. It's mostly about the right path. So we've separated between the read path and the write path. For the read path, it's typically good enough to have something like a universal resolver, like some of these tools that are available, the complexity typically comes with the right path. And I think that that's something that we wanna outsource, where people are like, hey, if you're very convinced that sort of like this is a good way, we want to enable you to write that as a plugin, so everybody can use it, and you basically are on your way to becoming agnostic to whichever underlying infrastructure you have.
And talking about the universal resolver, do you have an internal implementation of that currently?
So we have a driver,
Yeah.
or we used to have a driver for that. I'm not sure if it's still up and running. Fabio, do you know?
I think the endpoint was down and then was up. I'm not sure what is the status right now, but I think all the agents have that endpoint. So basically, I think the agent have one endpoint that replies exactly the same as the universal resolver, but just for the Prism.
Okay,
So
also with like version history, so that you have like the versions in the metadata and jump to previous versions of the DIT document, or is it just the current one?
I think it's just the latest version that it shows.
So we have a simplified version there. I would say if there's needs for making that more advanced, let's raise an issue so we can talk about that. But I think that's the way we're looking at it is it's probably going to be the most complex thing that we're going to do early next year, and we want to sort of look at the system as a whole to sort of say, okay, we're going to take this approach and cover probably like 4 or 5 different problems at the same time, like schema management, like linked resources, etc. So that's why it's probably going to take a little bit longer to do. But if you have input, yeah, we're all ears. So that's good. Any other comments? Looking at seeing that there's lots of technical team members here. Any highlights for what's to come? Hearing none, then sort of we'll leave it at this for now. Hopefully next week we'll have everything in the GitHub repo. I'm not sure if we're gonna get there in time, but at least we'll have some of that stuff in there, so we can it becomes more of a rolling overview. Okay, release management. So let me set the stage before Gonzalo will probably hijack the meeting. So we have monthly stable releases, which cover multiple components. So if I look at the latest 2.6 release, outside the Prism node, it has Open Enterprise Agent, it has the mediator, it has the SDKs, there's new documentation. And all of them have sort of like different versions, which is fine because we use semantic versioning, so that's expected. We're running into the problem where the SDKs, mediator, and agent are not always compatible with each other on the moment of release. And that breaks end-to-end tests and functionality, and it also breaks backward compatibility. I'm simplifying here, but this is sort of what the problem is in my view. And as a short-term fix, Gonzalo proposes, or not just Gonzalo, there's others who do as well, to have short-lived release branches. Which I think is a pretty good idea, but I don't think it will solve the foundational problem, which is our approach to sort of having multiple components that not just need to work with each other, but also need to work with a wider ecosystem. Also, it has its limits in terms of scaling if you want to go towards continuous delivery of features. Right, this short-lived release branches work with like a relatively steady release cadence. It doesn't really work with continuous delivery. We also want to have all components be as sort of spec compliant as they can be, and they need to be interoperable with other agents and mediators and SDK. So a simple sort of mental model to have is, let's assume any ecosystem, you will find Open Enterprise Agent version 2.2 5 times, 2.3 6 times, 2.7 8 times, because those were the people that sort of wanted to upgrade. And then you have Akapai and Verimo and like all sorts of other agents that are also part of that ecosystem. So if we're building an SDK, or if we're building an agent, because the same applies to SDKs and the other way around, we would like them to be interoperable with all of these versions. Now that poses a problem and is significantly complex, and we have to sort of think about what are the trade-offs and sort of what are the decisions that we need, what are the constraints that we are giving ourselves in terms of backward compatibility. My idea is that first and foremost, this requires a different way of testing and releasing, because right now we are testing implementations against each other. So working implementation of agents versus a working implementation of SDK, and they need to work together. My proposal is to add a contract to that in the middle and say, rather than having two moving parts trying to aim for each other, like let's fix one thing, which is the contract, and have two moving parts sort of aim for the thing which is static. There is significant complexity around that in sort of setting up that way of testing. So I don't want to underestimate that, but I do feel it's one of the few ways to prevent a longer term problem from keeping the surface. That's one part, because that only tells you, does our SDK work with our agent or our mediator? We also need to have a separate test, which is more around interoperability, where you have a collection of agents, Open Enterprise Agent being one of them, and you have a collection of SDKs, a collection of mediators that need to be tested in different configurations with each other. And I think it's an illusion to think you will score 100% on all of them. But I think we need to get some visibility as to sort of, hey, how does this work together? And this is where I get to the question and input part and opinion part. So my question to all of you as maintainers, saying, hey, how should we approach this problem? How should we define a contract if we go this route? How do contracts relate to backwards compatibility? For example, we can envision a core contract which sort of only changes on major releases, and sort of extendable contracts where you say, well, I'm doing this little thing for the minor releases, and sort of making sure you always support like two sort of versions. And also, how does it relate to like semantic versioning and release management altogether? Right, I want to sort of just put it out there. And I think I don't intend on making a decision on this, but I would like to see sort of everybody's input on this, because I think this is going to be an important decision that we need to make going forward, because otherwise we'll keep ending up in a very messy state. So there.
Can I start? Can I start?
You can. Well, so before you start my contract, I mean, let me just.
No, I know what you mean by
Esteban's question. So test harness, it could be test harness. It could be an interface. I think this is also very much up for debating what makes up of our contract, right? I think we have a REST API that sort of is a part of it. We have protocols that we support that is a part. We have interfaces. I think all of those. The definition of that will be our contract, and I think that needs to be very publicly communicated as to say, hey, this is the target contract that we all sort of strive to support. Gonzalo.
Okay. First, I agree with most everything that you said, but a part of the short-lived repositories. They are actually very common in continuous development.
Mm-hmm.
They are very common in any development release process, right? So, and as I said yesterday in our conversation, it will never fix the problems that we have right now. They are other kind of problems, right?
Yeah.
What they might help is the sanity of the release process that we got right now, right? It's not, it doesn't have sanity.
Yeah.
Okay? So on the contract, in my perspective, and this is my opinion, the contracts would have a single version that defines the contracts, right? Not the agent version, not the SDK's version, the contracts version.
Yeah.
It should be their own repository where the contracts are very well defined, right? And we would treat it as, for example, any JSON contract that is out there, right? There will be version. Then we have kind of bigger problems, right? Because the implementations of that will be responsible for by each version, for example, of the agent or of the SDKs, the mediator, whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that will be a bigger problem. And that will also introduce backwards compatibility, where we might have multiple agents, right, that can handle multiple versions of the contract. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say we have contracts 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, right? And you have agent 1.0, 2.0 that says, okay, we can handle version from 1 to 3.9, right? We can handle all these versions, right? And the next version that we release agent 2.5, we say, okay, so now we can just handle from 2.0 to 5.0 or 6.0, whatever, right?
Mhm.
So for me, this would be the strategy, right? In my opinion. It might differ. Some people might see it in another way that I don't know about. For me, this would be easiest. It will also allow that the agents that are out there don't have the necessity of immediately updating, right? Or they will lose compatibility with all the other agents that updated, right? It will give a lot, in my opinion, to the maintainability of the agents. So yeah, this for me what would be. So can you go up a bit on the upper side?
Sure. You mean this one?
No, one up. Yeah, that one. For example, in here, I would say like we just have like a new contract.
Yeah.
That is the contracts version that is on our release as well. For example.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
But we
So I like it. It feels that we're sort of starting to get alignment. Yeah. So Michael, to your point, yes, I think one of the problems is right now the contract is being generated at the moment that it's being implemented, because we have the Tapir code generating the contract, which is good because it's always in line with the agent. But it's bad in that sense that if the agent doesn't have certain functionality or implements it in a certain way, then the contract becomes a moving target in and of itself, and that's really hard. I think that's what sort of the SDKs are sort of encountering. If they want to do an end-to-end test where certain functionality is not yet available in the agent, then it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly jump in to say what Benjamin is saying, because we have different types of contracts. And we should think about all of them. So, for example, DITCOM contracts and protocols on the DITCOM level, they're more or less like specifications, right, that we follow. At least we try to follow. The issues we have there at the moment right now are related to our implementation of this contract, because these contracts are not 100% defined. And it's crazy. So even if like the basic protocols, the basis that we use is not always correct, so we don't know, like we can it can have different implementations. Some fields are optional, but we didn't think about it before, so we're just starting to get to that point. And yeah, in addition, we have our own contracts that we have to define. So it's kind of really complex problem.
Yeah. Björn?
Yeah, I like the idea of having the contract, but from a user perspective, there's also the issue that you have to keep up with the current development. So for example, our credential builder, which we wrote like a few months ago, again breaks. So from a user perspective, what I want is more like a long-term release. So which is stable, which gets all the security updates, which get all the bug fixes, which we find in the protocols over time. But where I, as a user, especially if I don't control the complete stack, so often it's fine if I have my own agent, I'm running my own mediator, then I can coordinate these things. But when I'm just a consumer of a single API and it's changing all the time, that gets quite nasty.
Would you so one way to think about this is you have a core set of contracts, which is the long-term releasing. We're saying, hey, what's the DIT methods we support? What's the cryptographic key material that we support? Which DITCOM protocols do we support? Like at the heart of it. And then for, I would say, minor versions, saying, hey, you can sort of expand those contracts with sort of something which is more sort of innovative, like, because that's, I think, one of the concerns that I would have, saying, how do we make sure we set expectations very clear and, like you said, for the long term, but at the same time also don't break down like innovation and saying, hey, if there is something that sort of is relatively new and saying, hey, we would like to, for example, we would like to introduce SD JWTs. That shouldn't impact like the core contract. It is an addition with sort of like a contract to say, well, if you are above version 2.8, you can support that. But every version sort of below that doesn't necessarily break sort of the core interactions of that. I mean, it adds a little bit of complexity, but it also gives a lot of freedom. And I think that like a lot of the things that you mentioned, security updates, bug fixes, I think at the heart of SSI, they will remain the same for like the next 12 to 18 months for sure. Like the simple JWT VCs are not going to change dramatically overnight. So core functionality should remain working. DITCOM protocols are not, I mean, they're already a little bit more active, but I think at the heart of it, like things like pickup protocol and stuff like that, they remain pretty stable. But we can keep that in the core and say, hey, let's just not touch that.
Go, Yuri. Go.
Yuri, okay. Thank you, guys. I've been looking 5 minutes where to raise a hand in Zoom, so that's why.
Me too.
So you can have it detect your hand and
yes,
raise your hand.
If we are talking about REST API definition, I want to say that breaking change always will happen because we are actively developing a number of capabilities in the agent. And these breaking changes are absolutely under our control. It's not the agent who generates this OpenAPI specification. It's usually a developer who designs the API and introduces these changes at the binding level. So we have 3 layers, like data access layer, business logic layer, and the HTTP binding layer, where we transform particular request responses to the domain layer. And doing this design is a primary responsibility of the engineers who are implementing or doing particular additional endpoint or changes to the endpoint. And I don't want to blame agent who generate this definition, because first of all, it's the humans who designed this API and introduce these changes. And from my point of view, by applying particular practices for designing and architecting REST API, like simple principle open close, keep particular logic isolated in particular path, for instance, and make it as stable as possible, and introduce additional paths if you want to add a new credential type or new credential subtype or some particular aspect. For instance, just applying this practice, it will help us to add additional endpoints for non-creds, for JSON, BSS, or for other credentials, and to keep stable the previous endpoints that corresponds to JWT credentials. At least keep the body's request response that corresponds to these parts. Second aspect, I just verified that current OpenAPI specification contains 4,599 lines. And managing this huge document without some additional tools is really nightmare. It's going to introduce additional complexity, and without, how to say, appropriate validation, verification, and maintenance of this specification is not going to be easy. What I propose is to analyze the code if we cannot find the answer in an obvious way, find the places where we change particular requests responses with the frequencies that really introduces breaking change. We can correlate some commits to the open source open enterprise agent and SDKs, and we will find these red spots. If we find these red spots, we can reconsider some engineering practices in order to at least stick to this principle open close and make our REST API much more stable. I believe that in the long term, it will bring us much more benefits than maintaining currently 4,599 lines of OpenAPI specification.
Well, so let me push back on that a little bit, but then I also want to give the floor to Gonzalo. I do think we need a separate process for the contract.
Give me 5 minutes. I need to find where to lower hand.
No, so I agree. It is there's added complexity, right? But I think actually it's necessary to do so, because I think that if we get to a contract first approach, that means that you can separate implementation from contract definition, and contract definition should be a relatively hard process by design. You don't want that contract to change a whole lot. You don't want that contract to change with an implementation. And I think that's one of the problems that is happening now. If the implementation changes just a little bit, the contract changes, and it's just, now we're just talking about the REST API, right? We also have like DITCOM and other things that we might want to have a contract on. The point that I think is, which is more important in terms of engineering processes and expectation management, is being able to communicate very clearly what's the contract that this agent or this SDK is adhering to. And the answer cannot be each other's contract, right? The contract needs to be an object that is discoverable, not just by our SDKs or our agent, but also by others. Say, hey, what are you expecting from me? And I think that, to your point, I disagree with the statement you made saying, well, we will introduce breaking changes because we are building it as we go. I think one of the little things we can do is like, let's do the API definition first, create a stub response and saying, okay, here's your 200 response, here's your 404, here's your 500 response. And then start on the implementation, because then you know the SDKs are working on the same contract as you are, and you at least have the same target. You might reach it at different points. That's totally fine. But the testing should happen against the contract and saying, yeah, these endpoints work now as per the specification. And that should be the end of your concern. Your concern should not be, does it work with this SDK? Because that's something you have no control over. Gonzalo.
Yeah, there are quite some interesting points that were said in here. I actually think it makes my opinion stronger on this. Because, for example, what Bjorn said, right? It's a very good point, right? As a user, you don't want to be stopped by breaking changes, right? That's why I think backwards compatibility is really needed in this case, right? And these will fix that point, right? So Bjorn has his agent, right? Well, the other agents updated, but they didn't lose the capacity of integrating with his own agent. So it's still there, right? What will change, and this goes for Yuri point of open calls, right? Is, yeah, we will introduce breaking changes on, for example, let's say we have version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 5, we introduced ZKP. Now we have ZKP unknown creds on our contracts, right? Well, if Bjorn is with a 4.0, yeah, he didn't lose anything. He still gets everything that he gets, right? But he needs to update for version 5 to get unknown creds, right? This is a breaking change. If we kind of engineered pretty well, and let's say we did something that is quite abstract and don't require to change the contract, and still add functionality like ZKP and such, will not have a breaking change on the contract, but the Bjorn will always need to update his agent version because we are adding features, right? So in this case, the agent version changes, the contract doesn't change. You know, this is what I mean, right? And this goes all towards API versioning, backwards compatibility. Like, we need all these versions to maintain environment. No, you said a good word, Bart, on our conversations. It was not environment. Ecosystem.
Okay.
To maintain this ecosystem, right? We should have this, because there will be too many agents, right? We hope so. There will be too many agents, each one with their own versions, right? And they will not update at the same time. And we cannot just break the interoperability just because we updated our agent, right? Or others updated the agents, right? So I guess with all these points, I even give more reason to my point.
So couple of things, right? Either way, we need to think about discovery, feature discovery, functionality discovery.
Yeah, I actually, there is a good thing that feature discovery can be, right? It did come already have feature discovery protocols. They should be implemented, right? And we can implement the same for the REST API, right? I think it would be really important if they existed to follow the current contracts that already exist. For example, there are a lot of contracts already existing for DITCOM, so probably don't need to create any repository for that, right? But for the REST API, there doesn't seem to be so many implementations out there. So probably it's beneficial to actually create a repository where we put the REST API, documented, and if there is any change, first it needs to be accepted there, right?
Yes.
So it's like the pattern goes. So if there is any change on the contract, first it's going to be accepted on this repository, right? Then agents can start implement it, be us, others, whatever. Then agents can start implement it, right? And release new versions that allow for this new version of the code.
I think that that's exactly what needs to happen. And again, I think that this shouldn't necessarily be a lightweight process, right? Because we want to stimulate the fact that we will not have breaking changes if we can prevent them. And no, it's definitely not going to be easy, but I think it's going to be needed if we want to be delivering something which is, I will say, superior to other agents and SDKs out there. Right? And I feel that, and this is also part of our transition, like into the open as maintainers, right? We keep thinking about our SDK and our agent. And we say, oh, if we only improve the communication between engineers involving in the SDK engine, you will not get the SDK engineers of Veramo in the room or Aries Framework JS in the room. Like everybody has a different cadence, everybody has different concerns. All we can do is be very clear about our expectations and make sure we are responsible in terms of interoperability. I will guarantee if we build SDKs that can work with the 4 largest agents out there, that SDK will win, like 100%. Same thing for the agent. If we have an agent that is very nice to SDKs of everyone else, like that agent will win. Like, so this is why I think it's very important to think about this, because typically with everybody being high on the promise of SSI and decentralization, between agent and SDK is typically where lock-in happens. Right, and it's starting to change now with things like the European Union, like wallet and the architecture reference framework and things like that are way more prescriptive. But that's like a 2-year process in the EU defining the contract for wallets. Right, so that's the level of complexity on like a European scale. So I think we can okay, we don't need 2 years, but this is a considerable exercise, which is why I think as maintainers, we should all agree on what the approach should be here. And saying, hey, if we want to build something for the community, we need to communicate very explicitly with the community. We need to have long-term support for certain things so they can build their platform on top of us. Yes, and we should totally reuse the standards, and like this is why spec compliance is important, right? And I think I wanna call out like Fabio and Anton, who left, for creating the mediator test suite, right? And doing those kinds of things. And I think that's incredibly helpful to build against the test suite, to not just test your own compatibility, but also interoperability with others. No, I agree. It's not something we've seen in other agents, so I find it also a very appealing thing to explore, to see how we could make that work. Taking into account that there is, I think in the next 12 months, there's going to be very regular updates of new features, because we don't have the feeling we're done yet. So balancing those two things is going to be challenging. Thanks for all your input. In the interest of time, I want to park this conversation for now. It's definitely not concluded yet. I would say let's see if we can work towards like a concrete set of proposals for this on how we do this, and we'll start driving this conversation in the next week or two. I mean, there's other meetings planned for this as well, but I think that it's good to sort of come back to this meeting as well and sort of make sure we validate that approach with other people that are using our agent. All right, so we have 5 more minutes. I'm gonna just present this topic, and if we run out of time, we can park it for the next time. There's a Discord conversation about this. David Poltrak has made a proposal for architectural decision records. Sort of relates to the contract, but then internally for how our stuff is being built. And he proposes that part of this maintainer call, we spend 5 or 10 minutes to highlight architectural decision records that need to be discussed in more detail. Where basically any maintainer can highlight an ADR that they would like to discuss. A maintainer is assigned as an owner, and they're then responsible for helping make that ADR move forward. We have in IO architectural office hours. So the proposal is to open those up for whomever wants to join and create open architectural office hours where we spend time on fleshing out the ADR, and then the maintainer basically updates this call and says, hey, here's what's happened to that, so we can then follow up and make sure we progress all the ADRs. Right now, we are still looking for a good place in the repository to make sure that the architectural decision records are easily discoverable. We have a website related to our documentation site where they're located, but I don't think it's super straightforward, especially for new ones that are under discussion to find. So I think for me, it makes total sense to spend 5 minutes each maintainer meeting to just sort of call these out. Does anybody object to that? Or have any questions? Hearing no objections, then I will report back to David that we agreed to doing this, and I'll ask him for the next session to highlight an ADR and sort of see where that conversation goes. Hopefully by the next meeting we will also have a few more open issues in the repository. So typically now most of our issues are in Jira tickets. I'll be trying to move some of those into GitHub to make sure that sort of they are more open and follow the community can follow them, and we can put them on the roadmap as well and make them visible there. I'm trying to figure out what the easiest way to do that is. It's probably going to be a gradual process rather than sort of trying to move everything in one go. It will probably take a few months so that all of the new issues that are being created are in the right repository and are put on the roadmap according to a new process. But that's coming. So we have 2 more minutes. Any questions, comments, things we forgot to discuss? If not, I would like you to have a very peaceful night, Michael. Sleep well. Thanks for joining, and everybody else have a wonderful rest of the day. And looking forward to the announcements. Make sure you hit your socials next week, and let's see if next week we can make a little bit of a splash in the kickoff meeting, because it's going to be good to see new faces. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bart.
Bart.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
bye.
Thank you, Bart. Have a good day. Bye.